is Lag BaOmer. Lag BaOmer today, 33rd day of the Omer, is the day in which the students of Rabbi Akiva stopped dying, and then Rabbi Akiva, as I mentioned in recent days, he began to rebuild his yeshiva. After the 24,000th funeral, he rolled up his sleeves and he built his yeshiva all over again. They died, without getting too much into it, they died for spiritual immaturity. The next 5 students that he built the yeshiva with, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was chief amongst them, was founded upon spiritual maturity. This Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai proceeded to become, these 5 students proceeded to become the greatest, the guy that wrote the Zohar, that wrote down the Zohar from the oral tradition, the secret of the Kabbalah. This Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and these 5 students, Rabbi Meir, we have him on the table here, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yeshua, and there was another one, I forget his name. They were the link, the bridge to the future of Judaism. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was the one that really went in the path of the Kabbalah. That's why we celebrate. Today's his yahrzeit, actually. Years later, he passed away on this day. And on this day, we celebrate. Yeah, he said, do not cry in my yahrzeit. Celebrate my yahrzeit, because it's not a day of death, it's a day of wedding. Yom Hilula. Day of a wedding. Why is it a day of a wedding? Because he emphasized the soul. He said, if your life is about the body, then it's the end of the train tracks. But if your life is about the soul, then this is a reunification of my soul with its father in heaven. It's rejoins a wedding. Two halves coming back together again. That's what death is. And this is the mature, spiritually advanced approach to understanding death. This is why, though we don't want death, but we're not fearful of death. We're not afraid of death. We don't want it because we prefer to be here in this world. But if it's going to happen, we're not just deleting. We're not just disappearing. We're actually reuniting. We're going home.
Well, I think that's the big fear. That there's nothing after.
Of course, that's a fearful thing. Of course.
But when you believe, your soul
Nobody wants to be
back in the
terminated,
anchor.
liquidated,
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Despair, we call
It's
it.
what it's what you're taking from your inbox and you're putting it into a folder.
Not even. How about you put it into delete and empty trash forever, right? That's what it sounds like to most people.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
But the idea of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the teacher of the Kabbalah, we celebrate today's Lag BaOmer as the celebration of the Kabbalah being taught to the world. We celebrate it with bonfires because bonfires represent elevation, right? Fire goes up, like everything else goes down. It's the opposite of the nature of everything else in this world. Kabbalah also lifts us higher. It inspires us as opposed to makes us more selfish. It makes us more selfless, like fire. And like fire, which is initially unapproachable. Kabbalah too is initially unapproachable. People are naturally afraid of it. But when you approach with caution, you realize that this is transformational. Yeah.
The 4 great cities of Israel.
Fire, air, yeah. Tiberias, Hebron, Jerusalem, and Tzfat represent the 4 elements of fire, air, earth, and water. So Jerusalem, Hebron is the burial of the ground of the matriarchs. That's representing earth. Tzfat, which is up in the mountains, the city of Kabbalah, represents air.
I thought Jerusalem was air.
Tiberias
Is water.
Tiberias represents water because that's what the Sea of Galilee is. And then Jerusalem would be fire.
I thought it was the other way. I thought Tzfat was fire. But okay. I defer to you.
It could be Tzfat is fire because Tzfat is Kabbalah and Jerusalem is air. It could be. I'm not sure whichever way. Either way, it's Kabbalah is represented by fire, and that's why we're celebrating Kabbalah on this day. Highly appropriate to learn Tanya today, because what is Tanya? Tanya is Chassidus. What is Chassidus? Chassidus is Kabbalah for the layman.
Remedial Kabbalah.
It's applied Kabbalah. That's what it is. It's about Kabbalah in a way that we can all relate to on a personal level. And that's what we're going to be learning today as we learn chapter 3 of Tanya. In our previous lesson of Tanya, we introduced chapter 3 as a most brilliant understanding of our toolbox, of our control dashboard, of what, we have these 2 competing souls within us, the natural soul and the godly soul, and how to balance. We have tools. We spoke about the intellect and the emotion, right? We spoke specifically about idea, understanding, and feeling. Idea, understanding, and feeling. We spoke about how ideas are generated through question marks through humility. Understanding is generated through thinking, horizontal thinking. And feeling is generated through meditation, which is vertical thinking. That means thinking deeply. Not trying to understand the various parameters of the idea as you would in horizontal thinking, but thinking deeply, dwelling on one spot. That's meditation, which brings you to feeling, right? Now, that feeling will generate one of the 7 emotions within you. I challenge you today to think about an emotion that you created within you proactively. Yes, sir.
You mentioned it, yes. I think during the sermon, I can't remember. When your back was bothering you a few weeks ago.
About what?
Your back.
Yes. Yes, I mentioned in the class. Yeah.
And so forth.
Yeah, he mentions it in the class.
Is that an example?
That's interesting because that example that I used about how to overcome my personal back pain through meditation was not going from intellect to emotion. It's interesting. I wasn't creating an emotion. I was just accepting. I guess I was making emotion because what I was doing is that I was accepting an emotion. I was transforming fear into acceptance, or anxiety into acceptance. So I identified in my head, and without getting too much into it for those that don't know what Warren's asking, but I took something which I was grappling with and I was accepting it. So I was making peace. You may call that the attribute of Hod. There's 7 attributes, 7 emotional attributes. Chesed, Gevura, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and Malchus, which are kindness, discipline, compassion, triumph, humility, connection, and communication. Humility is Hod, which is the one I just mentioned. Today, by the way, if you know anything about the Kabbalistic spheres, is Hod Shebahod. It's humility of humility is today's divine attribute. Okay, so without getting sidetracked too much here, let's get straight into this. We mentioned that every one of us is created in the image of God. That's what we're about to say this at the beginning of chapter 3. Just a quick introduction. We're all created in the image of God. What does that actually mean? There's many interpretations of that idea, but on a fundamental level, it means that just like God is infinite, yet chose to manifest himself in 10 modes of expression. God chose to self-limit himself in 10 modes of expression. Generally, there are 2, intellect and emotion. Intellect has 3 components to it. We spoke about those. And emotion has 7 components to it. We spoke about those. So God could have chosen 621 and a half modes of expression if he wanted to, but he just chose 10 for various reasons that are beyond this conversation. And in much the same way that God chose to express himself in 10 attributes, 10 modes of expression, we human beings created in the image of God also have those 10 attributes, those 10 windows of expression. So if you're wanting to experience self-mastery, if you want to experience a point where you are able to be proactive with your soul, instead of reacting to all the negative stimuli around you and hope for positive stimuli, you actually are able to control your life from within. Once you know what your 10 attributes are and how you have 10 ways of expressing yourself. So we have the same exact tools, a set of 10 for the godly soul and a set of 10 for the animal soul. I still want you to think about the question that I asked moments ago. When was the last time that you birthed an emotion proactively within yourself? Just think about that. You don't have to answer. Just think about it. Think about when you made a decision about something that you wanted to filter intellectually through your idea, understanding, and meditate on it to the point of feeling, so that you would generate an emotion towards it. The way things work these days, and I mentioned this in previous classes, is that whatever happens to be trending on Netflix or on the Washington Post or New York Times is where people's hearts and minds are. That's where people's hearts and minds are. That whatever happens to be force-fed down our throats from the media, as in foie gras, I think you pronounce it. Foie gras. But for someone who's a mensch, and when I say a mensch, is somebody who stands on his own 2 feet, will decide, autonomous, self-determination, will decide which emotions he wants to experience and which emotions he wants to keep outside. Now, the most exciting part of this chapter, in my opinion, is the third attribute of intellect. It's called das. Remember, Chabad stands for Chachma Bina Das, idea, understanding, and feeling. The third attribute is das, which means feeling, and that is the pituitary gland of our soul. Das is that intellectual faculty that allows us the ability to birth emotions. This is where, we don't have control over our feelings. We do not have control over our feelings, but we do have control over our intellect. So you can't control if you love to sin, or if you love chocolate, or if you hate black people. That's not something you're able to control. I know that sounds racist, right?
No, no, there are people like that.
You can't control them.
Keep going.
Can I ask you, please? Forget the black people. Forget the black people, if you were saying. Let me go back. Can I ask you, please?
Chocolate.
Can you please hate chocolate right now? Hate chocolate, please.
I can decide that I'm not going to eat chocolate.
No, I'm asking you to hate it emotionally.
Oh, emotionally.
I'm asking you to emotionally hate it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm imagining myself in a white linen suit.
I'd like you to think about the guy. I want you to think about the guy in a white linen suit. Oh, very.
And now I've got melted chocolate.
I love that. I'm going to get to that in 1 second. I want to tell you, to your point, I want you to think about the most annoying person in your life. I'd like you to love them right now. Can you do that, please?
I'm right here.
You can't do it. You can't do it because you cannot change your emotions. What Steve just did was very, very interesting. What Steve just did, he did a soul hack. That's what he just did.
Yeah.
He took a shortcut. What you did is that you said, I know that my emotions are a product of my understanding. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change reframe the context of the visual, and thereby the consequence of that reframing will lead to a changing of the emotion. So I'm going to picture myself on my bar mitzvah day in a white suit with somebody walking into me with a slab of chocolate hands, right? So then I'm gonna start to hate it because I reframed the context intellectually. You didn't change your emotion, you changed your intellect. That's either.
That's what they do with hypnosis. How they make you stop smoking or drinking or eating.
Yeah. That was Clockwork Orange also.
Yeah.
Oh,
Singing in the rain.
By the way, CBT. What's CBT stand for? Cognitive Behavioral Therapy. They think it's a new thing, but it's right here in Tanya. It's in chapter 3 of Tanya. Cognitive Behavioral Therapy. The idea is that if you change the way you think, you'll change the way you behave. This is where it comes from. You have full control over what you choose to think about. Remember, I told you this in the previous class. You can only think about one thing at a time. You cannot think about more than one thing at a time. I asked you not to think about polar bears, and every one of you thought about polar bears, right? Because you cannot think about more than one thing at a time. Can you think about 2 things at a time?
I practiced that.
Give me a break.
I can think of a polar bear and a panda. So that's
going back and
at
forth.
the same time.
Cousin.
Can you think about calculus and a panda bear at the same time right now? I'm going to ask you, we're going to ask you 2 questions at the same time. I'd like you to give us 2 answers.
Go ahead.
No, not happening. We know the answer. So, by the way, incidentally, they say that the Alter Rebbe was able to write with 2 hands at the same time,
Impossible.
2 different sentences.
Wait a minute. So he could do it. He's the one man of the generation.
Could be.
And I'm not.
Could be.
That's right.
No, so look, I'm saying, Steve, that maybe there are anomalies, and maybe you are one of those great
No, I
souls.
practiced. No, I wouldn't
Are
say
you an
that.
anomaly?
I am an anomaly.
Are you an enigma?
I
Okay,
am that.
so
Gum for gum.
okay, so let's keep it going, guys. So what I was saying was that if you want to, what we learned over here is that you don't have to think about certain things. You do not need to subscribe to certain newspapers. You don't need to subscribe to certain Hollywood media. In fact, you do not need to have a television in your home. I don't.
That's what Nietzsche says.
Some people don't have internet in their home.
Nietzsche says the most important liberty is to be able to say no.
That's right. The most important liberty. Beautiful. I love that. So you can filter out what you don't want accessed into your consciousness. Okay. Now, some people call that brainwashing. Other people call it education. Yeah. Well, how can you not teach your child about everything under the sun? Well, did you teach your child to eat with a fork and knife? Right? right? So, well, my child decided that some days she wants to dress like this, and some days she wants to dress like that. Really? So, anyways, where am I going with this? Is that you can choose what you want to think about, and you must. If you're going to be a mensch, you must choose. You have to make a decision. You know how many thoughts you have every single day?
A couple thousand more.
They say that it's north of 50,000 thoughts a day. It's a little hard to prove that because I think it depends on certain people's hardware.
How much leisure time they have.
You're done. I'm exhausted.
More a day.
Right. So let's say you have 50,000 thoughts a day. Just think about that. Most of those thoughts are externally stimulated, but how many of them do you actively dwell on? When you catch yourself, that's the question. The question is, you have to proactively control your thoughts. Certain images, they say, are benign because I'm not hurting anybody by looking at certain images. What you don't realize is the tremendous damage that you are causing within your own soul by looking or focusing or dwelling or meditating on certain images.
Yeah, that's the
Your thoughts are extremely powerful for your internal makeup. That's what we're learning in chapter 3.
That's what Rambam talked about.
What you dwell upon is what you begin to feel, and what you begin to feel becomes your actions, right? Be careful. So with all of that introduction, let's go into so what I was saying is that Das is so exciting because Das, we all are comfortable with getting ideas. We all are comfortable with understanding those ideas, Chachma and Bina. But many of us struggle to reach the pinnacle of Das, which is feeling. Most of us finish after we understand and we move on with our day. But how many of us meditate on that which we've already understood in order to proactively sire an emotion within us? If you do, life is beautiful. That's Chassidut, that's Chabad, right? And if you don't do that, then you're not Chabad, you're a Chab. Yeah, you're a
I've been
Chab.
called worse.
So when you daven, friends, I want to tell you, when you come to shul to daven, prayer can be extremely boring if you're waiting to be inspired from the outside. If you're waiting to be inspired from the outside, then you should have Jumbotron screens. You should have, something like the halftime show at the Super Bowl, right? Something to keep you entertained, right? Right. You should have, flashing strobe lights, like they do in the Miami Heat Arena. They should have announcers, different voices, right? Cheerleaders. But that's not what davening is. Davening is an opportunity to be able to experience yourself. That's how we get underneath that talus. And that's why you got to come in proactively. What are you davening with today? What did you daven with this morning is the question you should be asking yourself. And what am I going to daven with tomorrow morning? Yeah, what?
How about the translation?
Oh, beautiful prayer. Yeah, this is in the Silent Amida. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. In the Silent Amida, we say like this: you graciously bestow upon man and teach mortals. I'm gonna give it a real translation.
Because they don't.
You graciously bestow upon man and teach mortals how to reach feeling. Das. Graciously bestow upon us from your chachma idea, because where do ideas come from? Like a flash of lightning. Bestow upon us understanding, which is bina, and feeling, which is das. Blessed are you, Lord, who graciously bestows feeling upon us. Now, I want to tell you something else. So what we're praying for, Chabad, that's what we're praying for. Chachma, bina, das. Help me be a mensch, is what we're saying to God today. We say 3 times a day because it's saying, God, help me be the master of my thoughts. Help me be a mensch. And by the way, what the very first blessing we say in the morning is?
The translation says wisdom.
Yeah, wisdom, understanding, knowledge. I don't know who wrote
I'm
this.
just asking. I like the way you said it. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge doesn't mean anything to me.
Okay.
Like 3 words that mean exactly the same thing.
It's all Greek.
There's no 2 words in English language they say that mean exactly the same thing. So somebody was in a spelling bee and he was asked the question in the finals to verbalize a sentence, construct a sentence that would illustrate the difference between complete and finished. Complete and finished. So he said, when a man marries the wrong woman, he's finished. But when the man marries the right woman, he's complete. And he got a standing ovation. But then he continued and he said, but when the right woman catches you with the wrong woman, then you're completely finished. Okay. So the first blessing we say in the morning, the very first blessing we say in the morning is like this: Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who gives the rooster
Yeah.
understanding to differentiate between day and night. What a blessing! The blessing of discernment.
So that's Bina, which is the second.
Is that really Bina? It says Bina. It definitely says Bina. I've always understood it as Das. It bothers me that it says Bina. Because Das is the ability to differentiate, the ability to apply subjectively, perceive. It's perception. So it bothers me that it says Bina in that verse. Because I always understood that as a blessing of Das, a feeling. So I don't know why it says Bina. Anyways, back to the Tanya. Discernment is, I would think discernment is more Das.
Telling the difference between the two. Whatever. It's
Okay,
I'll
let's go. We're doing
with your
Tanya.
translation.
We're doing Tanya. So what chapter 3 is going to do eventually is going to explain to us in the words of the Alter Rebbe how to experience Das. And that's going to be really nice.
Wow.
Really nice. Let's go. Let's cover this. The first and last part of the chapter is more intense. The middle part is much more quotations. We'll probably fly through that part. So page 56, 55, bottom of the page. Your three brains, the anatomy of your soul. In chapter 2, you were introduced to the divine soul, which is literally a piece of God above. Your divine soul enables you to think about God and develop feelings for Him. In this chapter, we'll delve more into the structure of your divine soul and learn how it processes ideas and generates feelings. Now, each of these three facets of your divine soul, your nefesh, ruach, and neshama, contains 10 powers, mirroring the 10 heavenly sephiros from which they originate. Remember the image of God, right? In Kabbalah, God is described as unknowable, infinite light, from which a mere glimmer reaches the rest of the universe, while the infinite light defies mortal imagination. Kabbalah does introduce various symbols to depict how the glimmer of light is transmuted on its journey to this world. The core symbolism, which we find reflected at virtually every level, is a system of 10 energies or potencies, referred to by Sefer Yetzirah as Sephiros. The term has no single definitive translation and implies a wide range of themes. It could mean heavenly spheres, circles, lights, mystical colors, numbers, prime utterances, and character attributes. I understand Sephiros to mean sapphires, as I translate. Sephiros is sapphires. Just like a sapphire is a brilliant stone, so too these are amplifications of the one being expressed. They amplify. They're
Light goes through it and expands. And
Yeah. Exactly. That's how I understand it. The soul at all of its levels and facets is ultimately a reflection of the Sephiros. In the following section, the Tanya examines how different elements of the psyche are molded by the various Sephiros. Okay, so here we get into split into two groups. There are 3 mothers and 7 doubles, right? Let's just go to the very bottom of the page, page 56. This means Chachma, Bina, and Das. Inquiry, cognition, and recognition is interesting how he translates it. Inquiry, cognition, and recognition. Okay, those are the 3 mothers because they give birth to the emotions, the children. The last 7 of the 10 spheres are alluded to by the 7 days of creation because they are God's tools to deal with the external world. These are the spheres of Chesed, Gevura, Tiferes, giving, restraint, and harmony, which harmonizes Chesed and Gevura. Okay, I'm not going to get into this because we spoke about this at great length. What I am going to do is to jump to the end of the chapter. Here, page 62. 62. We're going to talk about page 62 right now, how to use your Das. That's where we're going. I've got a short attention span. If I, it's going to be super interesting for me to keep track. So I'm going straight in. Page 62, middle of the page, how to use your Das. So we've now explained the role of the first 2 Sephiros, Chachma and Bina. The 4th and 5th, which is Chesed and Gevura, kindness and restraint, which give love to love and reverence. And the Sephiras 6 to 10, which are derivatives of 4 and 5. Now, but the 3rd Sephira, Das, still remains elusive. So we understand how to reach idea. Idea is reached through questioning. Understanding is reached through horizontal thinking. I'm not going to use the word contemplation. Expansion. I'm going to call it consideration, because it's not deep. It's horizontal. We spoke about how the emotions are born out of there, but what is Das? Now, I've spoken about this at length, so by now you know what I'm talking about. We're just going to see it in the words of the Alter Rebbe now, right? Das, which means, I translated as feeling. He translated earlier as, was it cognition, I think he said? No, recognition, which is cognition and recognition. That's an interesting relationship. Cognition and recognition. It's like a ruminating. I like that. I like that interpretation. Cognition and recognition. Beautiful. Okay, so the term das, the word das means bonding and joining. Where do we find this word appearing in Torah as implied? And Adam knew Eve. Adam yada et Chava. Isn't that interesting?
To know in a biblical sense.
To know in the biblical sense. That's what Adam and Eve did. Adam
What's your
knew
point
Eve
about intimate knowledge.
in the biblical sense, which means it was an intimate bond between them. You and your knowledge. What is your relationship right now between you and the, let's say, the direction of the economy right now? Well, maybe that might be a personal question, but let's say just an idea, right? Like let's say there's certain ideas, like let's say a Dvar Torah that you heard, it could remain completely separate from you. A piece of Torah that you heard could
Could
see.
be academic or
It
it's
could remain
personal.
academic, aloof, abstract, indifferent, apathetic, right? But if you relate to it like Adam relates to Eve in the intimate bond connection, and he knew her in the biblical sense, that is the root of the word yoda, das.
So that's my problem. That's my key problem.
Why is that your key problem?
Is that I engage intimately and indiscriminately with every appealing idea.
What's wrong with that? That means you're a conscious person.
It means it's intellectual debauchery.
I don't think so. You mean intellectual adultery?
Well,
I don't think so. I don't think so.
No, because not at the intimate level. Ultimately, the intimate.
There's no monogamy with that thoughts.
Is a little more selective.
I'm saying, yeah, I'm not selective enough. That's why I'm distracted by a different project. I can have a different project.
Oh, you mean you're constantly distracted?
I get intimately involved with different.
He gets a lot of
every
hustle.
interesting idea that comes down the pipe.
So what's the problem with that?
I don't get it compromises productivity.
Well,
You've
That
got,
sounds-
you've got 10 books. I got 100.
That sounds like an ADHD problem.
You finish
So
that?
a little medication. I'll be all right.
No, I don't think so. I think ADHD is a gift from God.
Really?
Absolutely, 100%. ADHD is the ability to hyperfocus. You know what the H stands for? Attention
Hebrew.
deficit, hyperfocus dysfunction. A disorder. I don't know why they call. I don't know why they call it a disorder. It means that you're able to focus more than other people can.
And
No,
why
I
do
can't.
why do they
Focus very
get more
hard.
time to take a test?
Sure.
I find that in my self-diagnosis, I find myself able to focus much deeper,
Yeah.
and I consider it a gift.
It's a gift. It is a gift.
Yeah,
But
listen, whatever you
hey,
have
Not about me.
is a gift from God. There's no mistakes. There's no evil that comes from heaven. Whatever you have is exactly what you need. Okay? Whatever you have is exactly what you need. Get comfortable with that idea.
Hashem says in Isaiah.
Stop complaining. Stop blaming. Stop shaming. Just go for it. Embrace life by the horns and take the gifts you have and use them in the way you're supposed to use them. Okay, now, so this is a very powerful idea. The das is rooted in intimate union, in conjugal union, right? Suggesting that like physical bonding, das is the process of focusing your mind with a very firm and strong bond, an intense fixation of thought on the greatness of the blessed infinite light without losing concentration. And what was the product of Adam and Eve's bonding? Life. A product that was beyond comprehension, reproduction. When you experience das, I love it. When I experience das, the person I am on the other side of that is almost like a new person. I feel like a new person. There's a beautiful story of a guy, a chassid in Crown Heights, who was traveling to the airport for whatever reason, and he forgot his passport behind. So he turned around to go get his passport, but he remembered that there's an interesting tradition from Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid, 12th century, who states that when you go on a journey, you shouldn't go back on the same day because the angels that are escorting you won't be coming back. They do one trip. They're one-way angels. And then on your second trip, you wouldn't be having the angels with you. You'd be exposed to danger. You'd be vulnerable. He was concerned about this. Interesting.
I follow that every minute of every day.
Never go back. You never go back.
I didn't know I don't know
So
the angels
he
were.
called it up his office. Didn't know what to do.
The FBI was
Oh, the FBI was following you. So he called it up his office. And somehow the secretary told him that the Rebbe said, when you go home, learn a chapter of Tanya and then leave. Because when you learn a chapter of Tanya, you become a new person. It's like starting all over again. And I can relate to that within the context of Das. Doesn't just mean read the chapter of Tanya. Meditate on the chapter of Tanya. You're becoming a new mensch, like Adam and Eve giving birth to Cain and Abel, right? And Seth. You're giving birth.
Transformative.
It's transformational.
If you never go backwards, how do you learn from history?
Why do we never go back? This is a bit of a
Metaphysical.
quirky.
Talking about physics.
Yeah, we're talking about physically going backwards. It was a bit of a quirky tradition about when people that are set out on a journey, they shouldn't go back. Of course, you should go back.
George
You were
Santayana.
talking about-
No. I wasn't talking about allegorically. I was talking in a very physical sense.
No, in
Yeah.
Jewish consciousness, backwards, forward, there is no.
So let's keep on going.
direction.
So
Go
Das
whenever
does
we're
not. This is very important. Das does not add any new information which was not already fathomed by Chokhmah, idea, and Bina, understanding. Rather, it fosters an attachment, like Adam and Eve, an attachment to the existing idea to render it real and relevant. That's why I call it sometimes realization, because you're making the Zation real. You're making it personal. So the way I do this, by the way, I found a little hack to reach Das. And the way I do it is I ask myself, after I've adequately understood an idea, I ask myself, how does this wisdom affect or change my own life?
I ask how I can make money from.
Stop.
Okay, that's an interesting way to look at it.
That's just
But how does this idea affect my life? And I focus on it like a laser. I just focus. I look nowhere else. I don't think of anything. My phone is off. I just focus. And as I'm focused on it, I think, how does this idea affect my life? How does this relate to me? What difference does this idea make to my life? And now what happens is that it becomes personal. Anything and everything can and must become personal. Otherwise, you're not really alive. You know, have you ever been accused by a wife or something, or someone like that, a wife primarily, of being aloof, of not being present? No, because if that's something which you've experienced, then that criticism is potentially appropriate, because you're just not present. You're living in an academic world, but you're not really emotionally connected. You're not emotionally bound. Because even if you appreciate the greatness of the blessed infinite light with your Chokhmah and Bina, unless you bond your Das, focusing your mind, this is the key words here, focusing your mind with intensity and consistency. Those are the key words. Focusing your mind with intensity and consistency. That's what I called vertical thinking. You will not produce genuine love and reverence in your soul. The emotions that you sire will be only worthless delusions of love and reverence that you will not be able to sustain, because only Das makes the concept of God personally relevant to you. Is God an idea?
Yes.
Or is God a reality?
Yes. It's not.
Don't answer the question. I'm trying you to process it. So just process the question.
Not-
Is God an idea? Is it abstract and aloof? If it is, I can understand why the overwhelming majority of Jews don't go to shul, because it's nothing relevant to my life, unless I have a catastrophe. Then I need to find the rabbi.
Well, it starts as an idea.
They're not issues.
So what do you expect from these Jews that they never got a proper education? They graduated their Judaism at age 12 or 13. What do you expect from them? They're at the highest echelons of business, finance, innovation, technology, political power and influence. But when it comes to their Judaism, somehow they graduated at age 12, in many cases 7 or 8 or never. Right? What do you want from these people? They're spiritually stunted. There's no way that they could foster a meaningful relationship with God beyond God as an idea, which most of them don't even accept that, because they don't know enough about it. But assuming that they believe, okay, I believe, but God is as relevant to me as a farmer in New Zealand. Okay, I'm sure he exists. Very nice. No bearing on my life, right? But when you meditate through Das, and then God becomes your, let's go through this meditation. Okay, so there's a God. He's creator of everything. Okay, so what bears that on my life? Lovely. There's a God, and he's almighty, powerful being. Well, I could think of him with disdain as some sort of an insecure being that needs me to worship him. Or I could say, one second. So when my doctor told me yesterday that my days are numbered, God forbid, maybe I don't need to worry, because my life is in the hands of God. Now, suddenly, what just happened? is that my fear ebbed away into comfort, into peace, into serenity, right? That's what just happened. Instead of thinking of God as some farmer in New Zealand, I'm now thinking of God as an almighty being, which actually has bearing on my life. And one second, what about the economy? So I'm worried about hurricane season. I'm worried about interest rates rising. I'm worried about the price of my next vehicle, right? Will I be able to outlive my money? And I'm thinking, one second, oh, God is in control of everything. So money doesn't come from the IMF or from the bank, whatever, Yellen, right? It comes from Hashem. If that's the case, then I have nothing to worry about. Then what happens is I'm starting to sire an emotion, right? So one more time. Because even if you appreciate the greatness of the blessed infinite light with Chachma and Bina, unless you bond your das, focusing your mind with intensity and consistency, you will not produce genuine love and reverence in your soul, but only worthless delusions of love and reverence that you will not be able to sustain. They might be temporary, because only das makes the concept of God personally relevant to you. Therefore, das ensures the sustainability of the emotions and their energy. Since all the emotions ultimately depend on das, it incorporates chesed and gevura, love and its derivatives, reverence and its derivatives. We'll be talking about practical applications of das in chapter 9 and chapter 16 and chapter 42. So this, friends, is where I'm going to end it up today, or at the end of chapter 3, explaining that in order to be a mensch, in order to be alive, in order to be a real person, you have to experience vertical thinking. You've got to realize that you cannot change your emotions. You can only steer them. How do you steer them? You steer them exactly the way you did with your white suit, with your controlling your thoughts. Not just controlling what you're thinking about, but controlling what you're expanding on with horizontal thinking. And then the most critical part is controlling what you're vertically thinking about, what you're dwelling on, what you're marinating on, what your laser beam focusing on. And that is what's going to lead you to das. When you reach das, now you're going to feel a world of emotion within you. Now your life is going to turn from black and white to full color. It's awesome. Beautiful, guys. Thank you very much. Have a happy like Omer. May we all experience the opening of our minds and hearts with the power of this awesome day to reinvent ourselves in the most incredibly beautiful way with our relationship with Hashem.
Amen.
Amen.
And all